You shouldn't be here. Not in the way people mean when they talk about the odds of life existing. Not in some abstract philosophical sense. Literally, physically, the planet you are sitting on right now should not exist. 4.5 billion years ago, the largest planet in our solar system went rogue. It started moving toward the sun, destroying everything in its path. Every world forming in the inner solar system was being annihilated. The building blocks of Earth were being shattered and pulled into the sun before they ever had a chance to become anything. And the only thing that stopped it was Saturn, the quiet, ringed planet most people barely think about, the one that lost the size, lost the mass, lost the rivalry to Jupiter before it even really began. That planet saved your life before you were even a possibility. This is that story. To understand what happened, you need to understand one thing first. In the early solar system, there was a race. When the sun first formed, it was surrounded by an enormous spinning disk of gas and dust, hydrogen, helium, ice, rock, everything a planet could ever need to grow. But that disk wasn't going to last forever. The young sun was burning through it. Solar winds were stripping it away, and in roughly 3 to 10 million years, most of it would simply be gone. Think of it like a buffet that's only open for a few hours, every planet trying to consume as much as possible before the kitchen closes. Miss that window and you stay small forever. That is literally how planetary formation works. Jupiter didn't miss it. It built its core fast, crossed the mass threshold, and triggered a runaway process that nothing in the solar system could match. The more gas it pulled in, the heavier it got, and the heavier it got, the more gas it pulled in. In a geologically tiny window of time, Jupiter went from a rocky core to the largest planet in the solar system. 318 times the mass of Earth, 2.5 times heavier than every other planet combined. Saturn tried to do the same thing. It actually had a larger core than Jupiter, a stronger foundation, more pulling power. But by the time Saturn was ready to grow, Jupiter had already consumed most of what was available. Saturn ended up roughly a third of Jupiter's mass, smaller than it should have been, lighter than it deserved to be. At the time, that seemed like Saturn's problem. It wasn't. Now, before Jupiter started moving, and it did start moving, you need to understand something most people have never been told. The inner solar system wasn't empty. There were already planets forming close to the sun. Scientists believe these were super-Earths, planets several times more massive than our own Earth, wrapped in thick, dense atmospheres, assembling rapidly from the rich material near the young sun. Look at almost any other solar system astronomers have studied, and the inner region fills with large, close-in, rocky worlds. It's essentially the default outcome. More than half of all sun-like stars in our galaxy have these super-Earths packed in tight. Our solar system was building exactly the same thing. Right where Mercury orbits today, and even closer to the sun than that, there were worlds taking shape, bigger than Earth, more massive than anything in our inner solar system now. A completely different version of everything we know was almost finished assembling itself. And then Jupiter started moving. Nobody predicted it. Jupiter had formed out near what we now call the asteroid belt, about 3.5 times farther from the sun than Earth is today. That's where it should have stayed. But Jupiter had grown so massive that the disk of gas surrounding it was doing something unexpected. The gas was pushing on it, dragging it, creating a gravitational current that was slowly and relentlessly pulling Jupiter inward toward the sun. And unlike a sudden impact, this was something far harder to stop. A slow, grinding migration that had been building for millions of years with no natural endpoint in sight. Jupiter was falling toward the sun, the way a boat gets pulled downstream, gradually, continuously, with nothing ahead of it strong enough to push back. And with every step it took toward the sun, everything forming in the inner solar system got closer to destruction. Here's what Jupiter's gravity does to things in its path. It doesn't need to make direct contact. It reaches out invisibly and starts pulling at orbits, nudging objects that had been moving in stable paths for millions of years. The protoplanets forming in the inner solar system began to feel it. Their orbits were disrupted. Worlds that had been slowly assembling started being flung into each other at catastrophic speeds, triggering a chain reaction of collisions that fed on itself, each impact creating debris that smashed into more objects, generating more debris, more collisions, a cascading avalanche of destruction tearing through the inner solar system. And the remains didn't just float there. The dense gas still swirling around the young sun created a headwind that slowed everything down and dragged it inward. The rubble from those shattered worlds spiraled toward the sun and was consumed. Scientists estimate that as much as 10 to 20 times the entire mass of Earth was destroyed this way. Entire worlds gone before they ever finished forming. And Jupiter was still moving. By the time it had traveled from near the asteroid belt all the way inward to roughly where Mars sits today, it had fundamentally destroyed everything ahead of it. The rich disk that had been producing worlds was shredded. What remained was a depleted, battered, debris-filled wasteland. And if nothing stopped Jupiter here, it would have kept going, past where Earth would eventually form, deeper into the inner solar system, until there was simply nothing left to build a planet like Earth from. There would have been no Mercury, no Venus, no Earth, no Mars. You would not exist. What stopped Jupiter was Saturn catching up to it. Remember Saturn, the planet that formed later, lighter than it should have been, smaller than its own core suggested it deserved to be. When a planet migrates through the disk of gas surrounding the young sun, its speed depends partly on its mass. A lighter planet encounters less resistance and moves more easily through the gas. Saturn was lighter than Jupiter by 2/3, which meant it could migrate significantly faster. So while Jupiter was grinding its slow path toward the sun, Saturn was following behind it, moving quicker, closing the distance, covering in a fraction of the time what Jupiter had spent millions of years traveling. The moment that changed everything happened at roughly 1.5 astronomical units from the sun, about where Mars sits today. Saturn caught up. As the two planets got close enough, their gravitational fields locked together. Their orbits began to sync in a precise repeating pattern, where for every 2 times Jupiter went around the sun, Saturn went around almost exactly 3 times. Scientists call this orbital resonance, and in this case, it did something extraordinary. The gas disk between the two planets was swept clean. The gap that formed between them changed the balance of forces acting on Jupiter completely, and the drag that had been pulling Jupiter toward the sun for millions of years was suddenly overwhelmed by the combined gravitational pull of both planets locked together. Jupiter stopped moving inward, and then the direction reversed. Both planets, locked in their gravitational rhythm, began moving outward together, away from the sun, back toward the outer solar system where they sit today. Jupiter had been falling toward the sun for millions of years, destroying everything in its path. Saturn grabbed it and pulled it back. As Jupiter retreated, it left behind the shattered remains of the worlds it had destroyed on the way in. Rocky fragments, dust, ice, the crushed material of a first generation of planets that never got to finish forming. Over hundreds of millions of years, that debris slowly reassembled. Small pieces gathered into larger ones, and collisions that had once been catastrophic became constructive. A second generation of planets began to form from the rubble, from whatever Jupiter had left behind. Those planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. We are not the solar system's first attempt at rocky planets. We are the second, built from the wreckage of worlds that were destroyed before we ever existed. Smaller and less massive than those first worlds because there was so much less material to build from after Jupiter came through. Now here is the part that is genuinely difficult to sit with. Saturn being smaller than Jupiter happened because Jupiter consumed the disk material Saturn needed to grow. Jupiter essentially guaranteed that Saturn would be lighter. And that lighter mass is precisely why Saturn could move faster through the disk, which is precisely why Saturn caught Jupiter in time, which is precisely why the inner solar system survived, which is precisely why you exist right now. Jupiter robbed Saturn of its size, and Saturn used that stolen size to save everything else. Scientists studying other solar systems have found something that makes this even more striking. In systems where a Jupiter-sized planet forms but no second slightly smaller planet forms behind it, there is nothing to reverse the migration. The giant keeps moving inward until it destroys everything and settles into a tight orbit close to its star, leaving emptiness where rocky worlds should be. That is by far the more common outcome across the universe. Our solar system is the exception, and the only reason we are the exception is Saturn. Tonight, if you know where to look, you can see Saturn with your naked eye, a faint, steady, yellowish point of light, quiet and understated, easy to overlook against everything else in the sky. It doesn't look like much from here, but when you see it, understand what you're actually looking at. You're looking at the planet that lost the rivalry, that formed too late, that ended up smaller than its own core said it should be, that was robbed before its story even began. And you're looking at the reason you're alive to see it. Jupiter won. It got the size, the mass, the title of largest planet in the solar system. But it was Saturn, smaller, lighter, arriving late, that quietly reached out across millions of kilometers of space and pulled Jupiter back from the edge before everything we know was gone. It didn't do it heroically, and it didn't do it intentionally. It just showed up at exactly the right moment, at exactly the right size, moving at exactly the right speed. And that was enough. Jupiter won the fight. We're only here because Saturn lost it.